Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me, a show based out of Bexar Stage here in San Antonio, Texas, where I get to interview some of the most senior level improvisers of this community, of Texas at large, and of the entire country. Today's episode is actually kicking off our Diversity Week. We're going to start this show, with queer improv. And we have a couple of members of the LGBTQ community here on the panel today to pick their brains and understand what their experiences are and what they have to say. As usual, my middle square, my first panelist is Tina Jackson. Would you please join us?
I'm here.
Tina, I am sick and tired of telling everybody that you have 20 years of improv experience.
Well,
that you're the owner and operator of Bexar Stage.
That's just the moniker I have to live by, Rick. We all have our burdens.
Just I'm gonna throw in one small thing that we were talking about earlier. Just to throw something new, you mentioned during the conversation off stage before this that you love doing duos, and that for a while you were just doing duo after duo after duo.
Tons of duos. I love duos.
Okay.
It's an addiction to duos.
Now, Tina, as we begin this discussion, I hope it's okay if I say that you're not one of our LGBTQ panelists.
I'm not. No, okay. Not at all. Unfortunately, I am straight. And I will not participate in a lot of the discussion, as LGBTQ is not my personal experience. So I'm here to listen and help jog the conversation and participate in it as a theater owner whose job it is to create safe spaces for people of all kinds.
We're going to touch on that for sure. I think that's a really important topic.
Yeah.
But first, let's get out one of our other panelists. Rachel Austin, would you please join us?
Hi.
Rachel, hi. Rachel Austin, you are based out of Austin, Texas. Is that right?
That is correct.
Can you share with us the theater that you typically perform at, and how long you've been doing improv?
Yeah. So first off, just to note, so I'm bisexual, pansexual. I said bi before pan was a thing, so that's what I do. So it's hard to break old habits. And then I started out, I took classes at Hideout, but I have been kind of all the theaters in Austin, Cold Town, Hideout, Fallout, and then the Institution Theater. But in most recent days, I spend most of my time at Hideout and Fallout Theater. And I've been doing comedy for almost 7 years, and then doing theater since I was like 4. So
yeah, that's the good shit.
So, yeah, exactly. So until I found improv, and then I was like, what have I been doing this whole time? I didn't have to learn a script. You kidding me?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my background.
I talk a lot about that on other podcast shows.
Fantastic. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Frankie Benavides, would you please join us?
Francisco.
Francisco, Frankie, hey, man. Thanks for being on this show. Can you give us some background about how long you've been doing improv?
Sure. Geez Louise. Well, I just turned 41 yesterday. And the first time I ever auditioned for an improv group was the day before my 19th birthday. So I guess about 22 years now.
It's amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Frankie, we're getting old.
Kind of aged. Yeah. But, you know, I've had a lot of fun doing improv in all that time. Thankfully, I can say I've been doing it more than half my life. And, you know, I show no signs of stopping because it's so nice to do. You know, it's just a big old, it's like the psychic equivalent of eating Skittles. I don't know. And, you know, I can't do it. I've done Comedy Sports. That was my first ever improv. Comedy Sports of San Antonio and Austin while I was in college back in those days. And then I lived in Chicago for 12 years and I did some stuff with Annoyance and Second City. I took classes there and I even got to understudy on their main stage once, which was pretty cool.
The Second City main stage?
Yeah, 12 years ago. And then I took a little break from Second City for a couple of years. Then I did join Los Improviachis, which is the world's only improv mariachi band. And then I moved home, and thank goodness that was like about 15 minutes before Tina opened Bear Stage. So, because I was kind
we
of
scooped you up immediately.
Yeah, it was very fortuitous, right?
Which is great because we lived in Chicago at the same time, but we never crossed paths as far as we can remember.
I bet you like on the same train or something.
I'm sure we did. I'm positive.
Yeah. But yeah, so now my main improv activities are being a part of Key Party during Bear Stage Thursday nights. And I haven't been too involved. Oh, and I also do comedy sports. And I haven't been too involved with like any online shows since quarantine started. Because I gotta say, personally, I don't find it as fun, you know? So I gotta kind of get over that because I'm just not performing at all right now. But it all happened by accident. So glad to be here.
Well, 22 years later, it's not an accident anymore.
Yeah.
Might have started by accident, but it's no accident.
Rachel, I'm hoping you can kick us off. And what I'm going to ask you is just what does it mean to be queer and doing improv?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like my coming out was a big part because of improv. Because I didn't come out, I was closeted until 2017. And so my friends knew, close friends knew, but my family did not. And then as I got deeper and deeper into improv and felt like this freedom, it really, really inspired me to finally like be open with my family and like my work and things like that. Because before
what was it about improv that made you feel like ready to do that?
I think just the nature of it being one, like that you're playing different kinds of genders and you're playing different kinds of relationships and getting to really play that out and just seeing how audiences accept that. And thankfully in Austin, I've never experienced playing a homosexual couple and it like having any other reaction, but like, yes, this is entertaining, make us laugh. They don't care about that. And so, yeah, I think that was a big part of it. And then also just being, you know, I think of the nature of the arts, I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are a member of the LGBTQIA community and seeing what they were doing and how openly they were living. I was like, I want that for myself. And so, yeah, so I feel like that's been a huge part of kind of my own coming out story. But then I was also have been able to be a part of some really cool projects that are related to LGBTQIA, you know, issues, and I've been able to actually like voice stories and experiences that I've like held with me, but never been in a place that it felt like the right venue to share. And so I feel very lucky to have been able to have those experiences.
That's great. What about you, Frank?
So the question was, how was, can you reiterate the question again one more time? Like how has...
Oh yeah, super open-ended question.
Super open-ended,
what does it mean to be queer in improv?
Oh, what's it like to be queer and do improv?
What does it mean to you?
Yeah, for me, right. Well, you know, I think it's been similar to Rachel. I think that the improv has facilitated, you know, the act of coming out, you know, and it's facilitated, you know, my ability to manage diverse reactions when I do come out to them. You know, like I've had, you know, it's just the whole yes and thing. You know, you truly just don't think about what's anything other than what's happening in the moment, so that you can deal with it more thoroughly, I suppose, more purely. But you know, I've had friends come out, and I mean, excuse me, I've come out to friends and had some pretty negative reactions. You know, kind of like shocked, sort of like homophobic reactions. You know, I think they didn't realize that they had that in them. You know, but the improv has helped me both in like the conversation itself with those people, and also the philosophy of improv has helped me kind of accept if someone doesn't accept me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you know, one funny memory of literal being queer and improv is when I was a very brand new improviser, I was like 20 or 21 years old. And you know how Comedy Sports does the national tournament? It's for those who don't know what Comedy Sports is.
Championships, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a championship. That's what it was. And so in 2000, in the year 2000, it it was in Austin. And so like my group was hosting it. And we had to do this icebreaker on the first day where you just couple up with someone who you've never met from another city. And my partner was this guy, and we were just kind of telling each other about ourselves, and just for the heck of it, he goes, well, hey, well, tell me tell me something about you that nobody knows in your group, in your troupe.
Wow.
I was like, well, I haven't actually told anyone I'm gay yet. You know, it's kind of an interesting, I don't know how to do it. I'm much better at coming out at age 41 than I was at 21, but it's not as big a deal. But when I was that age, it was a lot scarier for me. It still can be sometimes depending on the audience. But anyway, so I didn't think he was gonna do anything with that information.
Did he do something with that information?
So what happened was he now at the end of the whole exercise, they gave us like 10 minutes or whatever with your partner. And they asked, hey, well, can we get a couple of groups to like volunteer and come introduce your partner to each other? And so I was like, oh, okay. I was like, it's fine. Because in his defense, he didn't know that it was like nobody really knew, because I said it so casually that, I don't know, like.
You did tell him though, right? Like that it was already, I don't know.
Well, he said, tell me something nobody knows about.
Nobody knows. Like he set it up. He knows that nobody knows.
And I just did not think that it was going to go anywhere beyond that. So anyway, we're up there and we're introducing each other to like the whole group of, I don't know how many, like I'd say more than 200 people. I don't know. But he like said, oh, this is Frankie, whatever. He likes chicken and he loves playing the guitar. Oh, and he's gay. And so it was this like massive silence in the whole room where I was like, I looked like I was trying to hold in a fart, like I was like, and it was like silence. Everyone's just staring at me. And there's a woman, she's in Girls, Girls, Girls nowadays, but Megan Flynn is a wonderful improviser. She's so funny.
She's so funny.
And she was like the queen of Comedy Sports in those days. She was like the boss, like first officer right after the owner, Les kind of a thing, Les McGee. But anyway, I remember, I'll never forget, Megan was sitting there and her legs were crossed, like one knee over the other, very late. And she was like, Frankie, I didn't know that. And I was kind of like, yeah, nobody knew. And then the whole room like erupted in applause. It was really like the most wonderful queer in improv story ever, because they were all like literally.
It could have gone so differently though. Oh my god.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But let me show you.
2000 too.
Yeah. It was in the. Sorry, I promised you that I wouldn't move around too much, but I just want to show you one funny thing before I go sit down again.
Frankie.
So in 2000, I just moved into this house, so it's funny because this thing was actually sitting right in front of me. But they gave me this little plaque from like the.
Oh, look how cute.
2000, August 1st through 5th. And they called it the I'm Just Saying Award. That's what my coming out award was named. They dubbed it the I'm Just Saying Award.
I'm just saying.
And that was the guy, his name was Matt.
Okay, so Frankie, what I want to do is underscore the idea here, the fact that both of y'all, Rachel and you, Frankie, came out at some point after you began doing improv. So Rachel, what I want to know from you is, did your feelings for improv change after you came out? Did your on-stage performances change after you came out to the people around you?
Yes and no. I think I felt like I had more of a voice to talk about things I didn't appreciate, and it had more weight because I was now like a card-carrying member of this group in a way. But for example, like two things that would really irk me is one, I would walk on stage and I was actually just like being myself, and people would always think I was trying to be a man and they would gender me. And that's very common. Like that's not an issue until it becomes a pattern. It becomes like a thing that I'm like, I'm just being a person and I am really tired of being gendered as a man. When I'm showing dominance, I'm showing confidence, and I'm playing a high status character, that does not necessarily mean that that's a male character. And in fact, I feel like we should just kind of explore what the relationship, and as gender matters, then sure, we can gender each other. But like that piece. And then I remember vividly being in a show, and I had, like I said, my close friends knew. So the troupe I was in knew, and then like my close friends, but I would not say like the broader improv community knew. Cause like I didn't have a meeting like
When you talk about it, yeah.
Yeah. But I can remember being in a show where there kept on being where men kissing was a punchline. Like that's a funny thing. It's funny when men kiss.
Hysterical.
Yeah, and it was happening again and again because you get a laugh. The audience would respond.
Right, you reward that behavior, and
yeah. And so I can remember finally being like, this grosses me out. Like this, like sometimes a kiss can be comedic and it can be this thing, but we're doing it again and again, and it's like this punchline of homosexuality. And it was nice because I mean the people I was with were like, yeah, it is gross. You're right. Like let's talk about it and let's figure it out. But so I think that's how I feel like I started advocating more for my interpersonal feelings towards strategies and scenes. And so I think that's how I would say I transformed over time.
That's great.
We want to hit a couple of those items that you mentioned. So the San Antonio improv community is relatively young. And a lot of us, like myself, I've only been doing improv for about 1.5 years now. For all of our watchers, for me, when you see that kind of behavior, how do you bring it up to somebody in a respectful way? Because this is somebody in our community that we're performing with, but also make it a learning moment for them to truly understand that this behavior really shouldn't be acceptable.
Yeah, I think it's punching up versus down. Like that's always like the phrase I think is like, you know, making comedy at the expense of someone is not really what improv is about. We're not
calling really what it should be about. Yeah. I mean, if it is about that, maybe we need to turn that dial a little bit.
And so that's how I would examine it, is just like, instead of saying like, hey, let's never do this, because that's impossible. There's going to be choices that we're all going to make, and you can't try and manage choice because you just don't know. Instead, it's like strategy, comedic strategy, and approaching it that way, in the sense of like, okay, you have this moment, this choice of kissing this man because you know the audience is going to laugh because it's two straight men kissing. Okay. That's funny, but it's also very done. Like, and I know improv is very quick thinking and we have reactions, but it's like, what would be a more fun choice for you that's also a stronger comedic choice that is not a stereotype over and over again?
That's and
like practicing that. I mean, ultimately, like, I mean, I've been doing improv for, you know, not nearly as long as some of you folks, but like it's repetition and practice that gives you the, you know, it's like muscle memory of like, oh, I've been here before. What choice do I want to make this time? And I think if you practice diversifying your choices, you're not going to make that same like stereotype choice again and again.
That's great. Yeah. And I think that lends itself to a little bit of what we were saying too, is when you were coming on strong and confident and you were labeled as a man. And even, you know, I would imagine most of your teammates wouldn't have necessarily even vibed that from you, you know, like necessarily, or been able to address why they made that choice. But you calling it out then brings it into question, is like, am I calling this person a man because they are presenting as a man, or am I calling this person a man because they're presenting, you know, like how you gender people in an improv scene being about how it's being portrayed, not who that, you know, like.
Well, and it also goes back to like
character choice you've got to make, but.
And your communication strategies, right? Like, I think that's a big part of it, is especially if you're working with a group over and over and over again, it's like, when I'm trying to communicate gender, I typically am doing it within line versus my body, because I think men and women can both be like this or like this, like, you know, and women don't hold their tits. So it's not like you can determine like, oh, she has tits, she's holding them.
Good. Somebody get a screenshot of this.
Yeah. So
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
We don't talk with our tits.
We don't talk with our tits. I mean, it's a missed opportunity, but yeah, I think it's thinking about that is like, if you're trying to communicate a gender because it's important for whatever reason to the scene that you're in or the point you're trying to come across, but that's also kind of the point is like, why does it matter?
Why does gender matter?
Why does it matter?
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, it does in an identity, but when it comes to a scene in a story, why does it really matter?
I have a duo with Lynn here, part of the community here, Lynn Thomas here in San Antonio. It's called Let Out. We did this entire scene of a relationship, 20 minutes, back and forth, arguing, fighting, I love you, I don't love you, that sort of stuff. We talked about it weeks later, and I remembered it as a lesbian relationship, and she remembered it as a straight relationship with two men. I'm sorry, a man and a woman. So I think that's hilarious, and I agree with you completely, Rachel. I think that why does gender matter in those relationships? Anybody can feel, anybody can love, anybody can hate, anybody can yell or scream or hold themselves however they want to. So, okay, Frankie, you told us that fantastic coming out story. What I want to know is what changed? What was different after that?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think, it's so funny. Everybody has like a bevy of hot potatoes they juggle in their life, right? Everyone has a bevy of crosses they bear, so to speak, So, I don't want to call my queerness one of those hot potatoes, but it felt like one when I was a lot younger. You know what I mean? And, and I would have had my fair share of issues, even if I'd been straight, because I'm a little bit of a neurotic person. But, so I would, if I were to create an analogy for it, I would say that coming out did to my improv what removing a big part of like a workhorse's load, but they're still carrying some stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I feel like, honestly, the biggest change I noticed was how people perceived me and how people kind of projected weird little stereotypes onto me. I was like, while Rachel was talking about being gendered on stage because all she was doing was being confident and assertive and showing a certain body language, I had a very similar experience, or an experience in the same vein, because I remember I was in class at the Second City Conservatory. So this would have been like around 2005, I'm thinking somewhere in there. And I was really loving it. I loved the experience. And, this is a few years after that other story, and I was getting a little bit better at dipping my toe into the water of coming out to new people and in new situations. And I was like, well, people should, I hope Rick's okay there.
I hope Rick's okay too. Come back, Rick.
Well, it looks like a cityscape.
Keep talking,
Anyway,
Frankie. Eyes on me.
I was saying, so I went on a date one time, and it was a horrible date. Just the date itself, like, it was just such a uncomfortable experience because, like, there was no chemistry, but the guy was really mean for some reason. Like, he was really grumpy and just bitter, I guess. And I remember trying to be like nice, and it's terrible, but like, how if you go on a date and you meet them for the, you kind of know in the first 10 seconds if you ever want to see them naked, in a sense, but you like, hey, I'm going to finish this date. I committed to spend the evening with him. We're going to have a couple of drinks. We're going to play Connect 4, because it was at that beer. What was the name of that bar in Chicago with all the board games? The one on near Wrigley Field.
Oh yeah, Guthrie's.
It was at Guthrie. And he was all mad at me because I said okie dokie. It was just the weirdest date ever. And so he was like, really? You say okie dokie? Anyway, I'm telling my class at Second City Conservatory about this horrible date. I think we were doing an exercise where we just tell a story from our lives, then our classmates like act it out or something like that. So Anyway, I tell my class about this date, and a couple of guys go up to like do it, and all of a sudden we're just both Liberace, you know. And I did. You've never seen me behave like, you know, not that it would be a problem if I did, but like,
Right.
like, you know, like the stereotype of like the effeminate mannerisms that.
Yeah, it's just not necessary to attribute those qualities just because I was talking to you about a date that I went on with a man.
And, you know, and it was just funny because I didn't even mention anybody's man story. We were both similarly just nondescript in our mannerisms.
But somehow that story translated to like, like you said, Liberace.
Yeah, like, you know, like seriously, I was like, why am I this bitchy little bunny foo-foo type? I don't, you know, like it was just funny. I was like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
Like,
So
I guess that's how you perceive me going on a date. Weird.
Yeah.
Oh, goodbye again, Rick.
Oh, Rick.
So sad.
You know, it's just funny, you know, like I think that it affected me on stage.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that positive experience of coming out just made me more willing to just try weird stuff on stage.
Did you guys find any camaraderie with other LGBT improvisers that really helped you sort of unpack some of those feelings?
I was really lucky in that I got to be a part of a show called Big Gay Musical.
Oh, hell yes.
Yeah, which
that was like last year sometime, right, at Hideout?
Yeah, I think it might have been 2 years or 3 years
Really?
ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it was directed by Bridget Brewer, and Frank Sanchez was the assistant director, but it was an all queer cast, and it was an improvised musical, and we would have two what we called monologists a night who would tell true stories from their life, and it's from them, so it's queer. It doesn't necessarily have to be about coming out or any of that kind of stuff. And then we would do songs and inspired scenes by the emotion that they talked about. And I think in that show, the thing that really was revealed to me that I didn't realize I felt until I was with that cast was how much fatigue I felt about the coming out story. And that from a hetero point of view, and when we look in media, the only queer and gay stories, or the majority of the queer and gay stories, especially at that time, even though this was even just 3 years ago, it always tends to center on the coming out and like the reaction of family and friends and all of that. And it's like, that is such like a tiny slice of a human being's experience. And so what I loved about the show is we were able to explore all other aspects and like the joy of being queer instead of the drudgery that I think is portrayed in media of like tragic stories of like, things like Brokeback Mountain, which is a beautiful story, but it's tragic. And media really, like when it comes to TV and movies, really show that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. And so it's like, man, I just want a joyful story. And so, yeah, but I did feel because a thing I definitely feel even now is and deal with is like being queer enough. Because like if I'm dating someone who identifies as male, people think I'm straight. And then if I'm dating someone who identifies as female, then I'm a lesbian. And so it's like this weird erasure where I feel like I have to constantly explain myself of like, oh, well, and it's weird because I'm like, when do I say this? I feel that way in dating. Every time I date anyone, I'm like, when do I tell them that I like all equipment? And, when does that come up?
Rachel, how does that translate into scene work?
Yeah.
Does that confusion by your scene partners, does it manifest itself somehow on stage?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yes and no. I think like it was something I was super worried about 4 years ago, but now I think like just having more time, I feel very much like confident that if there is confusion as to is this just a friendship or is this like are you trying to make a love story happen? that then sometimes as the character, I'm like, oh, I'll just go with that feeling. I will just double down on the feeling I'm as the person having. Or I'll just kind of break that fourth wall and be like, what are we doing here? Are we lesbians? Like, what's happening? I'm not sure what
do you think is going on right now?
What's going on? Can we just take like a microsecond to pause? Okay, that's what's happening. Great. Let's go back to that hilarious joke we made 15 minutes ago and call it back. You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a question in our Twitch chat right now that I'd love to address, because I like what you said earlier about like gender not really necessarily being not really even being necessary in a lot of our relationships. To explore a relationship, we don't need to necessarily know the gender. But one of the things we say in improv a lot, especially as teachers, I'm taking this from a teacher perspective, is like, name your scene partner, identify that relationship, and like, you know, to really hammer those things in. But what's the line between like naming a person, you know, like obviously there are some gender neutral names that we could use and that kind of stuff. But if you use like a names listed here, Lisa, Raul, and being respectful of gender neutrality in reference to scenes not necessarily needing gender or possibly avoiding gender, like what kind of opinion do you have about like being named in a scene? Do you appreciate being named in a scene because it helps tell you who you are? Do you take it as a gift, or do you take it as sort of a, well, I guess it probably depends on the scene maybe, but maybe exploring like the idea of naming in a scene and how some of your straight scene partners or even your LGBT QIA plus scene partners could do to be more supportive in gender identity within improv.
Yeah. I'll take a first pass on that. And Frankie, I'd love to hear what you think too. So one thing on names, this is just like a pet peeve of mine that I'm just going to say, is I love being named. I love giving names. I think it's a beautiful gift. A name is not a gender. So that's just reality. A name is not a gender. Like,
good point.
I mean, it's not. And so I think gender should, if it matters and it's important, I think most time, I think it makes sense for the person who, the character that they should, it's kind of in their court. Because if it's someone who doesn't, it's not something that's going to impact their performance, then they're just going to take the gender and go on. But if it's someone who is impacted by that, I think you should have the power to correct, because that's a normal thing that happens in life, to correct pronoun or to clarify pronoun even. Like, I think actually even leaning into like, oh, Maurice, it's nice to meet you. You know, my name is Rachel and my pronouns are she and her. What are yours? Something like that so quickly normalizes the thing that we should be doing in real life anyway. And if we could represent that in comedy, that'd be awesome. But the other thing I was going to say about just names that's not necessarily related to LGBTQ is I would love if we would use more diverse names that aren't just white sounding names like Jake, Sam, Dylan, and use names like Isabella, Marconi, Raul, and then the other person not necessarily pick an accent. Just be that person. Like, or if you do an accent, that's not the punch. That's not the comedic thing you're bringing. Like, that's a very powerful choice, but I get very tired of, and I think also like when you watch a lot of improv, there's just certain tropes you see over and over again.
Yeah, you do. You're right.
I get so tired of someone saying, "Oh, Rodrigo, it's nice to see you," and they're like, "Ah, yes, I'm Rodrigo," and it's like that's a cool choice.
But if it's the only choice we're seeing when we name somebody Rodrigo, then it feels like we're saying, hey, I'm not just gifting you a name, I'm gifting you an entire character.
Yes.
And really, Rodrigo can be anybody.
Yeah.
I think is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Frankie, what do you think?
So, Frankie, well, specifically, what I want to say is, do you feel trapped right now? If somebody gives you a name, do you feel trapped by having to use the standard gender of that name?
You know what? It's an interesting thought. I have never been given, look at me. I have never been given a name. At least I don't think I could say I have, that all of a sudden I had to justify or didn't feel, like if someone calls me a female name, I'll just, okay, that's my name. In my head, maybe I shouldn't think that way. I think, well, I guess I'm a girl now, not regardless of my, body parts. But, like, I'm going to try and channel a female energy that, you know, and that not like I'm gonna go grab my chest, you know, during the show,
That's
but
not
just
what we do. We don't do this.
like you know what I do when it comes to things like that is I think of people in my life that I know very well, and I just sort of try to channel them. You know, so if somebody calls me, you know, Samantha, like, you know, then maybe I'll just try and channel Tina or channel my sister, you know, or just a woman in my life. And I'm not trying, and I do have enough conscious thought in those moments to think, okay, you're not going to go into a stupid stereotype. You're not going to make this the punchline.
And I do think you do. I mean, I think you have plenty of ridiculous characters, but I as a woman who has played with you many, many times, I've never felt like you've stereotyped women in your characterization of women. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I remember a fun show with you, Tina, where it wasn't like, you know, I think I was playing a male and you were playing a woman, you know, but like, I did do something to you in that scene where I think I sort of cut you off or like didn't let you finish the idea because I got hyper and ADD on you and on stage.
It happens.
So, but I kind of negated what you were doing, and I remember like for the next minute and a half, I felt so guilty. So in the middle of the scene, I broke the fourth wall and apologized. Remember that?
Yes, I remember that. I don't remember the scene, but I do remember you being like, Tina, I'm so sorry I cut you off, and I really shouldn't have done that.
Folks, hold on. Tina, you know,
I do remember that.
It's funny, you know, I've always tried to play with the gender and sexuality of my characters, but no more than I do with other physicalities or, you know, accent. I love accents, you know me, like I love.
Yeah, you always have.
I tend to dwell more in the just what weird things can I do with my face, you know, like, yeah, no, fortunately, I haven't had to deal with that in a way that I felt, you know, held back or negatively viewed or stereotyped or anything like that.
And I also think it's important, like, as we're talking about these things and thinking about it, like, I very much am a big believer in, like, I don't really want to police people on how they do this. I think it's more of like, what sparks joy and is a thing that you're joyfully inspired by versus trying to worry about the pitfalls. Like, I think like if there's a thing that you really want to practice, awesome, practice it. But then when you're on stage, you have to give yourself grace that, you know, there's a lot going on. Your nervous system's going crazy and you might have gotten a bad suggestion and blah, blah, blah. And so I think it's more of just after a set being conscious of like, am I proud of everything I did? And was I going from inspiration, or where I feel like a lot that can happen is the times that we have blunders and say things that we're not as proud of and rely on stereotypes is because we're operating from fear and we're wanting to be funny. And so those are the times, whereas if you follow inspiration and you're really tuned into your partner, more times than not, you're going to follow the joy. And the joyful part is like usually diversity and usually pulling from your own experiences and finding characters that are detailed and nuanced that might have a crazy accent or might be based on a stereotype, but then you fill it out by giving more detail. And so in which case then they're no longer a stereotype, they feel real. And that's great.
Yeah.
I remember
I love that.
Will Gelman from Second City, he was a teacher. I remember that reminds me of something he said, Rachel. I remember one time in class he made like this speech about the difference between a character versus a caricature.
Perfect.
And caricature, where you're more likely to fall into those tired, offensive tropes. But if you make your character like,
that's what I would say about, you know, the people in your class who made your date with a man really effeminate and not even how you as a person are, right? Like they weren't even characterizing you properly, let alone this other person that, you know, that you hadn't characterized with those qualities. So that turns into the caricature of an effeminate gay man rather than who the character is and how people operate. And
what I think maybe our job perhaps as people, as queer people, is to perform a show that queer individuals are actual real people, real humans, persons with real personalities, real lives. They're not caricatures. And what I'm also hearing from you guys is that one thing, I don't think anybody has said this specifically, but what I'm hearing over and over again is what I've heard in all of my classes, and that's make bold choices. And not just bold choices on stage, but the two of you make very bold choices with regards to who you are with your identity. And then you took that onto the stage. Folks, that's the end of our show. I thank all of my panelists for being on my show. Tina, thank you for hosting the show. Much appreciated.
Well, when you disappeared, I felt a lot of pressure. I'll be frank. I missed you immediately. So
I don't know what happened there.
No, I think just in closing, before you wrap up, one of the things I've always loved and appreciated so much about improv is the diverse community that we get to experience life with. You know, my voice is my voice, and I can say it as loud as I want. But improv is a collaborative art, and what I love so much about it is that, you know, you shout your voice, whatever your voice is, and I shout my voice. You know, we make a beautiful, you know, we make music together. We make something really beautiful and unique. And so I think embracing identity, whatever that means to you, whether that's gender or race or sexuality or whatever, really makes you the only person who can say use your voice. And so I think unique voices in improv really blend so well and interestingly together and make our art so much more beautiful. So yeah, good. I love improv. Good.
Me too.
Rachel, Austin, thank you so much for being on the show. I love hearing what you have to say. I love getting that experience that you provided with us. I appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
Frankie, Benavides, thank you for being on the show. Again, those stories were fantastic. Thank you so much. All of our Twitch users, thank you for watching live. Thank you for the questions, for the comments. I love having you guys there. I want to remind you that we are doing Diversity Week. So on our Wednesday show, we have players that represent the Latinx players of the community. And that's going to be another fantastic show. Folks, one more thing I want to say, and that's that things are kind of crazy outside right now. And if you liked what you saw today, and you're a member of an improv community someplace, go online and do some research. They're probably closed right now and aren't getting a whole lot of revenue. If you're able to support them somehow, donate to them, please do. If you're a member of the San Antonio improv community, or if you just loved what you saw today, go to bearstage.com and there's a donate button right on that homepage. Folks,
and if bearstage.com is too complicated a website for you, just remember NAACP. Make that donation somewhere else. That's fine with me too.
Absolutely.
So.
Lots of places, lots of people need our help right now. Guys, thank you all so much.
Bye, everyone.